In this video, I'm going to look at how to make a bar graph in Google Sheets. So what I have here is some data. The first thing, of course, if you're using Google Sheets, is to open up Google Sheets. And then if you want to make a graph with data, you need to enter in the data. So I have data here on film showings for a local theater in 2018. I've got the type of movie and the number of those movies that were shown. So the first thing is to type that in. And then if we want to make a chart, we're going to highlight that data. So I'm going to highlight the label as well as the number. To do that, just click on one corner and drag and lift up to have them all highlighted. And then we're going to insert, so go up the top, insert a chart. Now when I click this, Google Sheets is going to just take a guess at what chart you want. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Now I want a bar chart or bar graph. When I click on chart, it doesn't give me a bar graph. Instead, what it gives me is a pie chart. Now, we're going to talk about pie charts in another video, but say here we don't want the pie chart. We want a bar graph. Now, what we can do is go to a chart editor and change what type of chart we're using. Before I do that, sometimes what happens is you accidentally click away from the chart and your editor is gone. What do you do if you've clicked away and all of a sudden you don't see the editor? Just click back on the chart and there are 3 little dots in the upper right-hand corner. Click on those dots and that will give you a pop-up menu and you can click on Edit Chart to get back to that chart editor. Now in the setup, which is what comes up first, you have the option of chart type. Now remember, we wanted to do a bar graph here. Google Sheets is going to start you off with some options, and one of them is a bar graph. We're going to take a look at that one in a moment. But there are also, as you go down the page, different options that you can get creative with. What we're going to do, though, is do a straightforward bar graph. So I'm going to click that, and notice it changes my data immediately into the bar graphs. Very simple, like just a couple of clicks and we've got the graph, the basic graph. And it even labels in the bottom of the bar each of the bars. Notice each bar is, the height is representing how many of those movies there were. Now this bar chart is great, this bar graph. We could copy it into a document, but before we do that, it is really important that you always label your graphs. We should have a heading, we should have labels on the 2 axes. We've got a vertical axis and a horizontal axis. So to do those labels, what we want to do is go back over to Chart Editor, and instead of the setup, we'll customize. Now, there are various options under customization. You can look at chart style, chart axis, and chart and axis titles, legends, horizontal and vertical axis options, and then grid, lines, and ticks. We're going to concentrate on the title. So I'm going to click that, and I get a menu that comes up. The chart title that we would be what is overall for the entire graph. There are other options, though. We could have a chart subtitle, a horizontal axis title, a vertical axis title. We don't really need a subtitle, but I definitely want an overall title for my graph. So remember what this represents, and I can click here to put in the title text. This is representing film showings. So I'll put film showings for a local, and notice it starts to fill it in as I type this in, for a local theater in 2018. So I've got a description in that tells in the title what this is about. And the title comes up on the graph as I type it in. Now, a couple of things. Notice that title isn't centered. If I wanted to center the title, I go down to title format, and if I have an alignment button, which I can choose to center. I think titles make better sense when they're centered on a graph. I could also make that title bold to make it stand out a little better. And I could change the color of the title if I want, make it blue. I'm just going to go back to black. Okay, so here's our basic graph with the title now, but we also want to have titles for the horizontal axis and the vertical axis. I'll start with the horizontal axis. The horizontal axis is related to the types of movies. So a simple title would be just saying type of movie. And I might want to make that bold. Notice with this label, it automatically has it kind of centered, but you could change whether it's to the left, to the right, or left. I think centered is best. All right, now let's do the vertical axis. So the vertical axis is the number of films shown. So I would want to specify that number of films that are shown. And I might make that bold again. Now, it's important to have a label on that vertical axis, because if you don't say number of films, it could be that number is in thousands, it could be that number is in millions, or it could be those are individual values. That number could also represent percent. We don't know until somebody labels that. So you always want to have labels on your graphs. You can investigate these other options and play around with them. One thing I like to do is to look at the grid lines, because here our grid lines for our vertical axis are skipping by 5s, 5, 10, 15, 20, which is pretty good for the data. Google did a pretty good job of guessing what would make sense. But say you want a little more detail. What we call that is the step on the axis. So if I go to the grid lines for the vertical axis, there's an option for step, and I can put in how big that step is. So if I don't want it to be 5, say I want it to be 10, which gives us less detail, which is probably not the way we want to go. Or we could do 2, which gives us more detail. So you can put in how wide you want that step to be. You could even go to 1 if you want. Now that's almost too crowded. So I'm going to go back to 2. So once you have the graph as you'd like it to be, you can click out of the chart menu, and you've got the graph. Now you could import this into another document, into a paper you're writing, but it's very quick to put this graph together. To copy, you could just simply click on it again and copy the chart. Okay, so that's how you do a bar graph in Google Sheets.